Hello everyone, it's Helen at Journaling Planet, and today I've got a video about pimping your junk mail envelopes. I think, if I'm honest, you probably could do this craft without the junk mail envelope and just fold, pieces of book page or craft paper, but personally speaking, I really felt like having the template of the envelope there was very important to me. Like, it made the craft a lot easier. So what I started doing was folding the envelopes and cutting off the front where the fold was. I then had some TLC to do because I'd ripped these envelopes open without really thinking about the fact that I might reuse them, which is not very like me, but I must have just been in a bit of a rush that day. And so I'm just wrapping this piece of book page around the envelope because right now it doesn't really have a side on that side, but it does now because of the book page. And then I'm just doing the same around the other side to keep it nice and sturdy and keep the sort of width of the envelope even on all sides. Make sure that every part of it has the same amount of support because junk mail envelopes are pretty flimsy. The book page that I'm using is actually a German book. It's a book that I wrote. It's a translation of one of my books. The publishers keep sending me foreign translations of my books, and it's lovely to see them, but they send me way more than I need. I really just need one to go, isn't it lovely that my book got translated into that language, and put it on the bookshelf, and I end up with sort of 3 or 4 copies. So not one to let these things go to waste. I donate some to a local library where people are looking for books in their language, and then I hold on to one for crafting. So that is what the paper is. But of course, you can use literally any book page or any scrapbook paper to cover the envelope. I did take some pains in making sure that the inside was covered so that when it was opened, it still looked pretty. Just a bit of glue on the back of some book page and then just sort of shimming it down into the envelope. The most time-consuming part of this craft is covering the envelope with whatever you're using as the background, in this case for me, the book page. But it's quite a relaxing way to spend time, so it's hardly a chore, and I know by the end of it I'm going to have something that looks really quite special. One of the trickiest things in covering the envelope was making sure that it wasn't too wonky, that it was lined up as best it could be. And once I had that all kind of covered up, I was ready to start embellishing it. And for the embellishment, I had decided already on some fussy cuts that I had from a book. It was an art book. And I decided that I wanted those fussy cuts to just take center stage on the front of the envelope and be the only thing that we really paid attention to. So I'll show you those in just a moment. But before I did that, I just inked around and rounded the corners on the flap of the envelope just to add a little bit of a sort of finishing touch to it, really, so that it would look finished once I'd glued down the embellishment. And my distressing is actually running out, but I keep squirting it with water because I'm quite cheap. And a little bit out of frame here, but you can see that I'm going to cut along that part of the image so that the top of it is on the flap and the rest of it sort of hangs down underneath. When I was lining that up, I did sort of end up chopping one of the ladies' hats off because otherwise it looked a bit off with their heads where I cut it. And I didn't really like that. So I just realigned slightly so that their shoulders were a little higher up the envelope. It didn't look like I just cut their heads off. So that then lined up very nicely. If I was doing that again, I think one thing that I learned is that I'll probably actually cut the image with my guillotine rather than my scissors, because as mentioned on previous videos, I am not the best at cutting straight. Once I'd had it all glued down, I would then went round with my Derwent Inktense pencil in charcoal and got my paintbrush with just a little bit of water on it and went round and kind of outlined the image just to make it pop. I then covered up the last little bit of the envelope that was still on show, just to make sure that that was covered up and that it was no longer obvious that this had ever been a piece of junk mail. Now that, you might argue, is kind of fine as it is. I didn't really need to do anything else to it. And yet, here I am. melting wax because I decided that I would in fact add a wax seal to it as well. This is a completely unnecessary step. I do think it looks lovely, but you could do this project without any of this. And in fact, there are many tutorials on YouTube about how to make fake wax seals if you don't have wax and wax seals yourself by using the glue from a glue gun. And I know that Treasure Books does a particularly excellent tutorial on that. So if you're interested in using your glue gun to get very similar effects to a wax seal, I recommend searching her video on YouTube because Natasha is absolutely fantastic at teaching, and it just means that you're not having to buy supplies if you want to emulate something like that. If you already have a glue gun, you don't need a wax seal. You can make something very, very similar. So then I went to this second envelope and I started repeating that process. In this case, the envelope really was in quite a state and I had to do some very careful and time-consuming TLC to the envelope. It's still helpful for me having that template there. So I think really for me, this craft is best done with the junk mail envelope as the base, as the sort of substrate. As I say, if you just want to make an envelope out of craft paper or book page and then just glue the embellishment down, you can do that. For me, I found it really helpful having the junk mail envelope as the substrate. I do something a little bit different with the third envelope, which I'll show you shortly. We'll get to that one soon. But this is essentially repeating the same process of, cutting the front off the envelope at the top, gluing down book page to keep things sturdy, and also to make it look a little bit prettier. Let's be honest, junk mail envelopes are not known for their aesthetic beauty. And one thing you'll notice when I glue down on the front flap, I always glue down with the text facing downwards. I didn't want the text to be upside down. So I sort of made sure that the orientation was right, even though it would be in contrast to the rest of the text on the back of the envelope. I'm not really too worried about the back of the envelope because when I put it into my journal, that's not really going to be seen. So to me, the most important thing was that on the front, the text pointed downwards, i.e. it sort of read down the page as it would as if you were reading it in a book. I didn't want the text to be upside down. And that is a mistake that I've made on previous projects where I haven't thought about the fact that the flap on the envelope folds over. Then before I know it, I'm looking at upside down text, and that's annoying me. So for this one, I had this lady from another book, and I just cut off roughly where I knew her body would reach to on the envelope. And as I've commented on other videos, I am quite brutal with my fussy cutting. I do not cut around every last little line. If I think it's too fiddly, I'll just cut through that and make it a sharper silhouette. And that's exactly what I did with this lady because her hat was a lot more fiddly than you see in this final shot here. And I still, at the end of the day, go around with my Derwent Inktense pencil and with a bit of water and just make that image pop on the page. I'm doing my inking last this time. I decided that it was actually better that way around. I think, you get a sense of which edges need the most inking that way, and you're not wasting product on something that's actually going to be covered up with an embellishment. And this wax sealing process is quite slow. It does take forever to get enough wax onto the paper. I'm just telling you this in case you do try it yourself and you sort of get a bit frustrated. The number of times that I've not put enough wax down and then got like half an ink seal. So it does take a little bit of time and a little bit of patience to get enough wax. And you just sort of have to trust that the wax that's already on the page will stay liquid until you press that stamp down on it. So going around to do my inking now. And, I really was pleased with how these first two turned out. I am pleased with how the third one turned out, but I think I prefer what I did with the first two. However, just for those of you who do like a bit of variation in your projects, I thought I would show you what I did with this third one. I had this image of a lady that was quite close up. I decided I wasn't going to back anything with book page or anything like that. I was just going to put the image straight down on the envelope and wrap that around the envelope as best I could to cover as much of it as possible. And any remaining pieces that were still kind of showing junk mail envelope, then I would cover those with book page. So my idea was that the book page image would just take up a lot more real estate and that there wouldn't be any kind of text in the background because this is kind of a close-up image. I thought it might be quite striking to have an envelope where it was just a face looking out at the person reading the journal. Now that I'm watching this video back, I do like this a lot. I think when I first made it, I was thinking, oh, I'm not sure if I like this as much as the others. But now that I look at it again, I actually can see that it is, it's a pretty cool piece of ephemera. And I think it's just when I put it next to the other two, I wasn't sure. I think I preferred the others better. But it is very striking having that very close-up face looking out at you from a journal. So perhaps I was a little bit quick to choose my favourite when I finished the project. I think that when you open the envelope, it looks a little bit strange just having this piece of book page and the bottom of a face, but I don't know, I don't mind it too much. I think it just looks a little bit odd in comparison to the other two. But all in all, I was pleased with how this turned out. And so I'm just filling the inside now with the book page and getting the last couple of pieces of the envelope covered so it's not obvious to anyone that this was a junk mail envelope at any point. I think I will actually give this process where it's more of an up-close image and it sort of takes up more real estate and you only have a little bit of book page, sort of text book page added to the project. I think I'll give that a couple more goes before I kind of decide whether or not I, want to do it generally in my journal, because looking at that third one now again, I can see the beauty in it perhaps a little bit more. I did have a go just out of interest of rounding the corners and see how I felt about that, and I don't really necessarily think it changed much. I think it's fine to have the image as it is without the rounded corners, and perhaps it means also you won't accidentally show the underneath where there's book page covering the inside. So those are all the projects that I made. And I really do love how they turned out. Certainly you would never think that they were made with junk mail envelopes. If you found this interesting or entertaining, I'd really appreciate you subscribing. I hope you found something helpful for your craft. Do leave a comment below and let me know if that's the case. And if you could give this a thumbs up or share it with somebody you know, I'd really appreciate that too. There'll be another video along soon. Until then, take care and I'll see you next time.